The river sent him back. Those were the words that ran through the village before the drums did, before the wails rose, before the elders locked themselves inside the council hut. The river sent him back. For 100 seasons of rain and dust, the people of Igbara had fed the river. One child each year, always chosen by the elders, always carried at dawn, always swallowed by the deep bend where the waters turned black and silent. And in return, the rains came. The harvest grew tall. The cattle birthed twins, and sickness passed them like a wandering spirit who had forgotten their name. The pact had been sealed long ago when the river spirit first rose from the waters in the shape of a woman with skin like polished stone and eyes like storm clouds. She had spoken to the ancestors beneath a blood-red moon. One child each year, she had said, and I will protect what is yours. The elders agreed. They always agreed. But on the 101st year, the river refused. It was before sunrise when they took the boy. His name was Kato. He was small for 12 rains, with quiet eyes and a scar beneath his chin from falling out of a mango tree. He did not cry. He did not beg. He walked beside the elders like one walking into a story already written. His mother had fainted when his name was called 3 nights before. His father had not spoken since. The entire village followed at a distance as tradition demanded. No one was allowed to cross the sacred stones except the chosen child and the 5 eldest councilmen. The air was heavy with mist. The river was still. Chief Nkosi raised his carved staff and spoke to the water. Great mother of depths, keeper of our harvest, guardian of our peace, we bring you what was promised. The drum stopped. Kato stepped forward. He did not look back. The elders removed his white cloth and painted his chest with river clay, the markings of offering. Then they pushed him into the black curve of the water. The village turned their heads. They always did. The splash echoed once. Silence. Long silence. Too long. The water began to ripple. Then it churned. A low sound rose from beneath. Not a roar, not a cry. Something deeper, something ancient. The elders stepped back. The water swelled upward like the rising back of a beast. And then, Kato's body rose. Not lifeless, not broken, standing. The river held him upright, as if hands unseen lifted him. His skin was dry. His eyes were open. And when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of thunder. She does not want children anymore. The mist thickened. She wants the ones who made the promise. Then the river released him. He fell onto the stones, breathing, alive. The river went still. Screams broke the silence. Women ran forward. Men pulled them back. The elders stood frozen, their faces drained of blood. Chief Nkosi's staff slipped from his hand. The pact had never been broken. The river had never refused. And now the offering stood before them, untouched by death. Kato's mother reached him first, clutching his face as if he might vanish. He did not look like a child anymore. Something ancient lingered behind his gaze. "What did you see?" she whispered. Kato did not answer her.
He only stared at the elders, and they stared back. By sunset, the council hut was sealed. The drums did not beat that night. No cooking fires burned. The village moved in whispers. Kato lay inside his family's hut, awake but unmoving. His father watched him like one watches a stranger who wears a familiar face. "You should not have come back," his father muttered before catching himself. Kato turned his head slowly. "I did not come back," he said. "The river sent me." Inside the council hut, fear sat heavier than smoke. "It is a test," one elder insisted. "No," said another. "It is punishment." Chief Nkosi remained silent, his hands trembling against his knees. Only the oldest among them, Elder Barasa, spoke what none wished to say. "We made the promise, not the children," he whispered. The hut went still. "Tradition must stand," Chief Nkosi snapped. "Even if tradition was born from fear," Barasa replied. The wind howled outside, and somewhere near the river bend, the water moved, though no rain had fallen. That night, the first sign came. The cattle refused to drink from the river. By morning, 3 goats lay dead without wound. The sky held no clouds, and the river, once clear, now ran dark as spilled ink. The villagers gathered near the sacred stones, staring at the water that no longer shimmered with life. Kato stood apart from them, watching, listening. The river whispered again, though only he seemed to hear it. And this time, its message was clearer. Justice. Not sacrifice, not blood. Justice. And justice had finally turned its eyes toward the elders. When the drums beat again that evening, they did not call for harvest. They called for judgment. And for the first time in 100 years, the elders were afraid. The sun rose over Igbara like a warning, not a blessing. Its light was harsh against the clay huts, revealing faces pale with fear. Mothers clutched their younger children, and even the village dogs whimpered in the empty streets. Inside the council hut, the 5 elders remained huddled in a circle, their breathing shallow, as if fear itself had grown into a living creature that occupied the space between them. Chief Nkosi leaned on his staff, which now seemed more like a frail branch than a symbol of authority. "What does it mean?" one elder whispered. "Why now?" Elder Barasa's eyes were heavy with the knowledge of years. "It has been too long," he said, voice trembling. "We have taken the children for 100 years, yet none of us asked the question that mattered most. Why the river demanded blood in the first place?" The words fell like stones. They had never asked. None dared. The pact was sacred. The river was their protector. The children were necessary. That was all they had been told generation after generation. But now, the river had sent Kato back, alive, untouched, and it had spoken to him, demanding justice. "What justice?" asked Elder Kondo, the youngest among them, his voice cracking. "We are the elders. We are the ones who made the promise. We were following what our ancestors commanded. How can the river punish us?"
Barasa's gaze cut through him like a spear. Because promises made without understanding are lies in the eyes of the spirits. Our ancestors knew the weight of the river. They knew the cost, but we have only obeyed. We have only repeated their fear. Now, the river no longer wants children. It wants accountability. It wants the ones who hid behind tradition. The council fell silent. Outside, the river murmured like a snake curling around the village, invisible yet present. Meanwhile, Kato sat beside his mother's fire, staring into the flames as if seeing not just its warmth but its soul. He did not eat, he did not speak, he simply listened. And the river spoke to him again. "You have been spared," it whispered inside his mind, "but you are not free. You must guide them." Kato's chest tightened. He understood the river in a way that no child should ever understand. He saw the guilt etched on the elders' faces, the weight of generations resting like boulders on their shoulders, and he knew without asking that he had been chosen to witness the reckoning. That afternoon, he approached the council hut. His mother tried to stop him,
but he shook her off with a quiet force that made her knees tremble. Inside, the elders recoiled at his presence. "You," Cato said softly, "stood by the river for 100 years, and you thought it was mercy you sought, but it is not mercy, it is truth." Chief Nkosi's voice broke. "We have done what was necessary. We have protected the village." "Protected yourselves," Cato said, "not the village. You took children to keep your hands clean, to keep your names untarnished, but the river sees all." Barasa leaned forward. "Then what should we do? Tell us, child of the river, for you have seen what we have not." Cato's eyes darkened. "You must face what you have done. You must answer for each name called, each life taken. The river will no longer forgive through your children. It wants the ones who made the decisions. It wants the truth to be spoken, or it will take more than just names. It will take flesh." A shiver passed through the council. Some muttered prayers. Others wept silently. Chief Nkosi banged his staff on the floor, trying to assert command, but even the sound seemed hollow in the presence of Cato's authority. Outside, villagers had gathered, drawn by the strange silence, the unnatural stillness that hung over the village like a fog. They watched from a distance as Cato's words rang through the council hut. Some shook their heads. Some whispered that the child was bewitched. Some began to fear that the river itself had risen to claim its own. As dusk approached, the first sign came. One by one, the elders' houses were touched by misfortune. In Elder Kondo's home, water rose from the river, flooding the floor while the fire remained untouched. In Elder Lemba's house, smoke poured from the roof, though no fire burned. In Chief Nkosi's courtyard, the goats went mad, attacking one another until the strongest fell silent. Barasa remained calm, though the lines on his face deepened. He said, "It is the river. Mark my words, it will not stop until those who created the pact answer for it themselves. And soon, it will demand more than words. It will demand action." That night, Cato walked along the riverbank alone. The water was calm, deceptively so. He kneeled and let his hand touch the surface. Ripples moved outward, then receded, as if the river were testing him. "You are the one I have sent back," it said, "but your task is not to plead for mercy. It is to show them the weight of their deeds. Guide them, or the village will drown under the sins of its elders." Cato's small hands clenched into fists. He had never felt so old, so powerful, and yet so unbearably young. By the next morning, the village had begun to tremble under the river's quiet, relentless demand. Crops wilted, livestock fell ill, and an unnatural mist hung over the river bend. Fear spread like fire, and murmurs of rebellion began among the people. But the elders did not see the danger in the eyes of the villagers. They saw only the shadow of the river's judgment creeping closer, and they knew, deep in their bones, that no child would be taken this year, not by force or by ritual, because the river had already begun its reckoning. And Cato, the child who should have died, was now the living embodiment of its fury and its justice. By sunrise, the village of Igbara had turned into a place of uneasy whispers. Children clung to their mothers' skirts, the smell of smoke and wet earth mingling like a warning. The river flowed silently, deceptively calm, yet its dark waters seemed to pulse with intention, reflecting the fear that had taken root in every heart. Inside the council hut, the elders huddled, their knees knocking, beads of sweat forming even though the morning air was cool. The river had shown them its power, but it had not yet revealed its true demand. That revelation came with Cato's words. "You think you understand," Cato said, voice steady and heavy beyond his 12 years, "but you have only begun to feel the weight of your choices." Chief Nkosi slammed his staff on the wooden floor. "We've done what was necessary for the village. We have obeyed the law of the river. It is enough." "No," Cato said, stepping closer, his eyes glowing with a strange ancient light. "You offered children because you were afraid, not because you understood. And now the river wants truth." Barasa whispered almost to himself, "The first promise. We forgot the first promise." The others froze. Chief Nkosi's hand trembled. "What do you mean?" "Long before your time," Barasa continued, voice heavy with memory, "when our ancestors first came to this river, there was no child offered. They made a pact with the river in secrecy, a promise hidden from the people. It was a vow of guidance and protection, and a warning. The river demanded obedience but not sacrifice. That part we invented." The council went silent. The truth, like a serpent, slithered between them. They had broken the first promise long ago, substituting fear for faith, and now the river's silence was not mercy, it was accusation. Cato's voice cut through their shock. The river wants those who lied, those who corrupted its law with fear. It wants the elders who thought themselves wise. Outside, the first signs appeared. Elder Kondo's hut collapsed into itself, timber groaning like it had aged 100 years in a single night. The villagers screamed from their windows, yet none dared approach the river. They knew its power now, tangible, undeniable. The river stirred. From its depths, a figure emerged. It was not Kato, but the river spirit itself, appearing as it had to the first ancestors, a woman with skin like black stone, eyes like storm clouds, and hair that flowed like the water itself. She hovered just above the surface, silent, waiting. The elders fell to their knees. Chief Nkosi's voice shook. "We are your servants. Take us instead. Take what you must." The river's voice was not heard aloud, but inside their minds it rang clear. "The children were never mine to take. The lies of your hands have poisoned this village. The debt is yours to pay. The river does not forgive ignorance." And then Kato spoke, as if carrying the river's will. "You must name each child you took, each lie you told to cover the truth, each ceremony performed in your selfish fear. Only then will the river consider mercy." The elders hesitated, their tongues heavy with shame. Chief Nkosi tried to speak, but no sound came. Barasa began, shaking, naming children taken long ago, their faces burned into memory. Elder Lemba followed, each word tasting like ash. The river did not stop them, it listened. And then the first twist unfolded. From the depths of the water, one of the children who had been taken decades ago appeared. Not Kato, but a boy grown into a man, eyes deep with grief and knowledge, silent witness to all that had been stolen. His hands were bound by chains of river weed, yet he walked freely over the water, his gaze fixed on the elders. "You thought we were gone," the river child said, voice echoing like the river itself. "But the river remembers, and now it wants you." The elders screamed, trying to flee, but the river surged. Kato stepped forward, holding out his hand. "You cannot run. The river does not chase, it waits, and it only demands what is owed." The village watched in horror. Some fell to their knees, praying. Others cursed the elders for their cruelty. No one dared approach the river. The river child extended his hand to each elder. As their fingers brushed the water, visions overtook them. Every scream, every pleading cry of the children they had taken, every tear their lies had caused. The weight of generations pressed upon them, and many fell unconscious. Chief Nkosi's scream tore through the mist. We were only following tradition." Barasa muttering, "We followed lies, not tradition, and now we must pay." Kato turned to the village. "This is not punishment for you," he said softly. "It is a reckoning. For centuries, fear guided the hands of those who claimed to protect us, and fear never brings peace. Only truth can." The river's waters rippled, carrying voices of those long taken, whispering and crying. A chill settled over the village, the first true understanding of the river's power and its justice. By the end of the day, the village had changed. The elders were no longer figures of authority. They were witnesses to their own sins, trembling under the weight of truth. The river returned to its calm surface, yet none dared speak of peace. They knew the reckoning was only beginning.
And Cato, standing at the water's edge, realized the path ahead. The river had spared him, but it had given him a task far heavier than life itself: to guide the village through the storm of truth, to teach them that tradition without understanding is poison, and that justice, even from a river, cannot be ignored. The morning came like a grey shroud over Igbara. The mist clung low to the river banks, winding through the village like fingers of memory reaching for every living soul. No birds sang. The goats had stopped their restless bleating. Even the wind seemed to wait, as though it had been warned not to disturb what was about to unfold. Cato stood at the edge of the river, silent, listening. He felt the pool of the water beneath him, not as a threat, but as a summons. The river whispered of judgment, of long-held secrets, of debts overdue. He had never felt so heavy with responsibility. This was not a tale for children. It was a trial for the living. The villagers gathered in the open square, their faces pale, eyes wide. Mothers clutched their young ones. Fathers, usually strong and loud, stood mute, their hands trembling. Everyone had heard what had happened to the elders' homes, had witnessed the river reclaiming its memory. Some had even glimpsed the child-turned man from decades past, walking over water with eyes that bored into the soul. And now, it was time for the reckoning. Chief Nkosi emerged first, his staff trembling like a reed in the wind. His robes were torn, his hands shaking, and the scars of past fears etched deep into his face. He looked at the villagers, and for the first time, he saw them, not as subjects, not as witnesses to tradition, but as humans, each bearing a fragment of the truth he had ignored for generations. We have sinned," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "We took children. We hid behind the river's wheel." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some gasped, others cried. But Cato held up a hand and the silence returned. "You have confessed words, but the river does not desire words alone. It desires truth, it desires action. Each elder must walk to the river, naming aloud each child taken, each lie told, each ceremony performed in fear rather than faith." The elders hesitated. Their knees buckled under the weight of centuries of tradition and fear, but the river's voice inside Cato pressed them forward, relentless. One by one, they stepped to the water's edge. Chief Nkosi was first. He opened his mouth and a long list tumbled out, names of children, whispers of lies, the reasons why each had been sacrificed. His voice cracked, his body trembled. Every syllable seemed to be drawn into the river, swallowed by the currents that had waited patiently for this day. Next came Elder Lemba. He stumbled, then fell, sobbing as he recited the sins he had committed in the name of tradition. The villagers looked on, horror and fascination mingling in their hearts. Then Kondo, the youngest, who once questioned the river's demands but had never spoken up, faced the waters. He admitted not only the sins of his hands, but the sins of the elders he had followed blindly. With each confession, the river pulsed, its black surface rising and falling like a living chest, as if it were inhaling the truth. And then the first true consequence arrived. The river surged, not in anger, not in chaos, but in power. The water leapt from its banks, swirling around the feet of the elders, but it did not harm them yet. Instead, it pressed against them like a reminder of gravity, a force that could not be denied. And in its murmur, they heard the first echo of justice. "You have seen fear, now you will feel it." The child-turned man from decades past emerged again, walking across the water. His eyes burned with sorrow and accusation. He spoke no words,
but each elder felt the weight of his gaze as if it were a hand pressing against their chest. The villagers too felt it, the weight of centuries, the silence of those who had been taken, and the demands of a river that had waited patiently for reckoning. Cato stepped forward. "This is not enough," he said. "You must go further. You must undo what has been done. You must restore balance, or the river will claim more than your words and your fear. It will claim the lives of the living to repay the debt of the past." And in that moment, the river's true demand became clear. It was not satisfied with ritual. It wanted justice. True justice, not mediated by fear or tradition. It wanted the elders to face the consequences of their decisions, to rebuild what they had broken, not just confess. The elders looked at each other, the first flicker of understanding passing between them. Their eyes were wide, their faces pale. They had led the village for 100 years, but they had never led it in truth. Then Cato spoke again, his voice carrying over the crowd like wind over water. "You must choose. Protect tradition and let the river punish all who live, or embrace justice and let the village rise from the shadows of your guilt." And the village held its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause. Mothers pressed children to their chests. Fathers clenched their fists. Every heart beat in anticipation, not knowing which path the river would demand or which path they themselves could bear. And as the elders stepped forward to rebuild, to make right what had been done in secret, the river receded slightly, revealing its true surface for the first time in generations. It was dark, yes, but it shimmered with potential, with justice, with mercy, if only the village could embrace it. But not all could. As the day ended, the village had changed. The elders were no longer untouchable. The river had reminded them that tradition, when corrupted by fear, is nothing more than chains. And Cato, child of the river, witness to the past, guide for the future, stood silently by the water, knowing that the final act was yet to come. For the river had spared the children, but it had not yet spared the village. Night fell over Igbara like a velvet curtain. The river's surface glimmered under the moonlight, dark and silent, yet alive with purpose. The elders stood at the bank, their knees weak, their hands trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of truth. Cato stepped forward, the glow of the river reflecting in his eyes. "Tonight," he said softly, "will the village choose to cling to the lies of tradition, or will they embrace justice?"
The villagers gathered behind him. Some faced the river with bowed heads, others with angry eyes. Some whispered prayers, others cursed the elders who had led them blindly for generations. Chief Nkosi knelt, trembling. "We offer ourselves," he said. "Take us, do with us what must be done to restore balance." The river paused, a ripple running through the village like a heartbeat. And then it spoke, not in words, but in a sensation that filled every mind. The debt has been acknowledged. The truth has been spoken. Justice will be done, but mercy is not gone. A strange wind rose, swelling through the trees and across the village. The waters glimmered, lifting the child-turned man from decades past into the moonlight. He looked upon the elders and spoke at last. "You have confessed, yet confession alone cannot restore what was broken. Only action can, only choice." The elders shivered. Cato's voice rose above the wind. "Will you protect tradition, or will you let justice rewrite it?" Silence answered him. Then, one by one, the elders knelt in the river, not in fear, but in acceptance. Their hands were placed upon the water. The river rose around them, warm and alive, as if absorbing their guilt, their lies, their centuries of fear. And when they lifted their heads, they were changed, not broken, not destroyed, but transformed. Their hearts were laid bare, and the river, in turn, released the village from the shadow of past sacrifices. The villagers gasped as the first clear water in generations flowed freely. Crops began to shine in the moonlight. Cattle drank without fear, and the river's song, soft, melodic, filled the night. The debt had been paid, not in blood, but in truth. Cato stood at the edge, finally allowing a small smile. The river had spared the children. The village had survived the reckoning,
And the elders, once blind to the cost of tradition, now carried the wisdom of justice within their hearts. The river whispered once more, "Remember this night. Tradition without understanding is poison. Justice without fear is life." Cato turned to the village, voice soft but certain. The river took only what was old. Let it be a guide, not a threat. The choice now is ours, to live in truth or to repeat the mistakes of the past. And for the first time in 100 years, Igbara slept under a moonlit river, peaceful, free, and forever changed. The river had refused one child, and in doing so, it had demanded the hearts of the guilty. The river had taught the living that some debts can only be repaid by courage, honesty, and the wisdom to let justice flow like water through every generation.